Welcome back. Today I am reviewing Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess by Bobby Fischer. There are also two other authors listed, and many people have speculated that the other two men did most of the work on this book. One of Bobby Fischer's biographers said that he spent some time working on it, but I don't know which is true. I do know the book first came out in 1966. There was a new edition in 1972. One of those years was before I was born, so I don't know much about that. I do know my copy is a reprint, a fairly recent reprint of the later edition. The book was produced or published by a company that was a subsidiary of Xerox, the company that makes copy machines. I didn't know they made books, but apparently they did at that time. The two men who helped co-author the book had an educational company. One, I think they worked for Educational Design Incorporated and began a new company called Learning International. Supposedly this book was an example of their learning method that they came up with called programmed instruction. In the introduction to this book, it says that is a new concept in teaching meant to help the reader learn quickly and retain the material far better than with ordinary textbooks or lectures. I also don't know if that's true. It seemed like a normal teaching book to me with a couple of oddities that I will get to. One thing about the book is that it starts with how to play chess, which fits with the title, Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess, but it takes 14 pages to list all the rules of chess and the way that the pieces move, which seemed longer than necessary, and also I felt that it was very complicated. I can find much easier places to learn how to play chess, especially for someone who's never played before. And then after that, there are about 40 pages describing checks, checkmates, and the various ways, the three ways to avoid checkmate: moving out of check, capturing the checking piece, and blocking, which they call interposition. So anyone who's already familiar with the rules of the game, the basic moves of the pieces, just skip to page 60, start there. Now from there, we completely skip any mention of openings, opening principles, middle game tactics, and the entire rest of the book, 300 and something pages, is just teaching checkmate. I will hold up a page of the book here. Let me see if I'm looking at the right one. There's a diagram on the right side, and then it'll say, here is a position from one of my games, Fischer versus so-and-so, 1957. And then the question is, in this position, would you capture black's queen? Yes or no? And explain your answer. And then you flip to the next page, and it says whether you got it right or wrong. I like that format, going through, answering the question. But most of them were checkmates. And most of the checkmates were queens and rooks, heavy pieces. Every now and then a bishop was in the far corner guarding a diagonal. In fact, some reviewers have said it should have just been called Bobby Fischer Teaches Checkmate, because almost all of the diagrams involve checkmate, how to do this checkmate, or realizing checkmate isn't possible, or at least a forced mate isn't possible in that position. One odd thing about the book was, and I'm going to hold it up again, all the pages that you read are on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is upside down. So you read through the book just looking at the right-hand side, and when you get to the end, it says turn it over. So you turn it over, and then you read through the right-hand side all the way back the other way, which was odd because you're accustomed to page numbers being odd on one side and even on the other side. Well, these are sequential all the way through on the right-hand side, and then you turn it over and they're sequential all the way through on the right-hand side with it upside down. That's unusual. You don't see too many books like that. The book was good for me because at the time I was relatively new to relearning chess. And I did skim through the first 60 pages because I already knew all of that. But the rest of it really helped me to recognize places or positions and patterns where checkmates will either be possible. It was good for helping me count attackers. And I think that's one thing a lot of people at my level struggle with. Will say, well, I've got my queen and my rook lined up, let's go for it. But they have enough defenders to pick those pieces off as they come in. So this showed like for example, a back rank checkmate where the king has been castled behind pawns. You have your battery lined up of your rook and your queen, and you come down there, check, a rook picks it off, your next one, check, and then you forget that there's a queen or something diagonally down here that can take your last piece. So it was very good about helping me count the defenders of that back rank or certain squares on the back rank. And I think another thing is that even for a beginner, it was fairly easy to understand. For one thing, they don't use chess notation at all, what we call algebraic notation, where you have like kx c6 or those sorts of things that we use in books to describe chess moves. In all of the text, the moves are just described with words. Queen captures bishop, for example. So I think for a beginner, that's very helpful. You're not accustomed to seeing a string of just characters, NXC6, period, comma, 2. After about 4 of those, some of us are lost. So using actual words, I think, was helpful. There were a couple of times where it would have made more sense to use notation, but then that would have required someplace earlier in the book actually explaining or teaching notation. So skipping it was probably a good idea. The only real complaint I had about this book was the quality of the printing, really, in my copy. So if you were thinking about buying it, you're in a library, a bookstore, flip through it and look. Some of the places, the dark squares were pretty dark, got darker than other places, and so that the black pieces almost were invisible on those. You had to hold it under good light to make sure that you can actually read that. I had a little problem with that, and that might just be my eyes. Also, some of the diagrams were oddly smaller than others. Let me just show that one more time. Some of them were almost half the page, like this one. That one's small because it's the answer to the previous page. But then other places, the diagram for the problem would get magically smaller. It would be like 1/8 of the page. I'm not sure why that is, but on those, especially the ones where the printing was dark, I definitely needed my reading glasses, and a few times I think I needed a magnifying glass. But the book is helpful, unless you already know how to play chess, and you're already very familiar with most of the major checkmating patterns, especially with rooks and queens, which is what this mostly focuses on. It does not focus on situations where the king is trapped and there's some tactic with, you have to cover all the squares with pawns and knights and, things like that. It's mostly picking off defenders and checkmating with the heavy pieces. I think there might have been a few examples of smothered mate. So I gave the book 4 stars at the time. I think now, thinking back, I might have given it 3 stars just because it completely leaves out the opening principles. It leaves out middle game and middle game tactics, skips straight from how to play chess to these certain kinds of checkmates. But it could be worth your while, again, if you're a beginner. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my next book review.